Well, good morning, everybody. This is Anthony Sanchez from Customers First Now. Thank you for joining us on our CX Leader webinar this month. This month, we have our CEO, Carrie Nelson, with us, as well as she will be introducing one of our special guests from our customers, from our customer, DTN. So thank you for joining. We definitely appreciate any questions that you have during the presentation. And if you want to go to your questions panel to ask us a question, please do so during the presentation. We will get to the questions at the end of the presentation, and we're more than happy to answer all that we can. So with that, we are right on time, and I'd like to now turn it over to Carrie Nelson, our CEO, so she can get started.
Great. Thanks, Anthony. And hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And, here as we all are closing the year and celebrating, hopefully everyone's celebrating a great 2018 and getting excited about 2019. I know we are here at Customers First Now, and I am so excited today to introduce Mark Holland, the Chief Operating Officer of DTN, one of our customers that I really want to feature today is the amount of things that they have gotten done to really build and implement an overall CX program, and they call their program Customer Delight. So Mark's going to walk us through some of the key things that they've done, and I know many of you that I've talked to, over the past few years, are going through things like that, building a CX program, whether it's you're doing journey mapping or you're building a survey program or scorecards. Mark and his team and what they've done to kind of bring it all together, I think is a really, just a good roadmap and example for, you guys to take away today. So I'm going to have Mark, we'll have him introduce himself and his company. I will turn it over to him here in a minute. I wanted to share just a few key things as you think about what Mark talks through today. When you look at any kind of CX program, again, DTN calls their program a Customer Delight program. And, the key is it's about action. So, you want whatever data you're looking at, whether it's through a journey map or it's through survey data or operational data, to really be helping your colleagues and team members drive actions that are going to have the right results for your customers. And so it really comes down to, I think, being very clear on your overall outcomes and that you measure them. So why are you even, focused on building a Customer Delight program or a CX program? I mean, the why is really important, and it's not just to make your customers happy. That's one, I hope all of us want to do that, but there's a reason we want to. And really linking that to the business benefits is really key. And Mark will talk about the things that DTN is looking at as they've built their program. Identifying your senior level sponsors and stakeholders is also so important. Sometimes what I see is, it's important to start a program, whether it's about a survey or journey mapping, and it starts somewhere kind of in the middle of the organization, which is fine as long as there is senior level sponsors that are going to, engage, look at the results of what you're doing and do something about it and help remove barriers and give you investments and, make it part of the company strategy. So that is really important as part of any sustainable program. And last but not least, one of my two favorite words is pace. Knowing the pace by which your company works best is important. So some companies move very fast, some companies move kind of medium, and some slower. And there's always good reasons for the pace of an organization. The key is know the pace that's going to get people engaged, learning, continuing to keep, doing what you need them to do. But again, really, really making sure that the things you're asking people to do can be done with everything else they have on their plate. So pace is important. My second favorite word is sequence. So then the order by which you do things is really critical as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark at this point, and this is really kind of the setup of, the outcomes, on the left-hand side of the screen, the roadmap that we put in place with Mark and his team. But I'd love, Mark, you just to talk about kind of who is DTN and a little bit about yourself, and giving a little bit more context to the outcomes and the approach you took as you started off the year.
Sure, Carrie. Well, good morning, Carrie. Good morning, Anthony. Good morning, all the attendees for this webinar. I appreciate the opportunity to participate today to explain the process that we went through with DTN, a complete, comprehensive process that was led by Carrie Nelson. My company, DTN, we are a global company that is a leadership role in several different marketplaces to include agriculture, transportation, and energy. We provide actionable insights and data analytics to help our customers make better decisions. And we've been in business since 1984. We have a global reach throughout the world. What's been so important for this program and this initiative for us, Customer Delight, is that it allowed us to understand, even though we've been in business, since 1984, things that we do well, but how do we improve? How do we become better to make our customers more successful? How do we reach them? How do we engage throughout all aspects of our business to our customers? If you talk my background, I worked for several different businesses and organizations throughout my career, from a VP of a sales and marketing position to division president. I've had the pleasure and opportunity at DTN to serve as a senior vice president, starting out running their sales organization, and then progressing on to the chief operating officer, also with responsibility for agriculture and transportation marketplaces. This program that we've started with Carrie's team and with her leadership, we've done a lot. At DTN, we were divested from Schneider Electric about a year and a half ago. And since that time, we've made 5 acquisitions. And the cornerstone of everything we do for our business going forward is around customer delight. No matter what different processes, no matter what different tools we bring into place, the cornerstone, the foundation of its customer delight, and it's critical to our current business operation, to our future business operation. Carrie, I'll turn it back to you.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Mark. So just, when you look at the left-hand side of the screen, so of course, DTN was very focused on the experience. They really, to Mark's point, they really wanted to improve their customers' experience. And we're going to talk about what we did there. But it was also about the culture. So they were becoming their own standalone company from Schneider. Schneider had a separate, different culture. And DTN really was very focused on, building a culture around the customer. And then when you look at, looking at their internal processes, which they were very focused on, they were implementing Salesforce.com in the midst of this initiative around customer delight. And then, of course, revenue and profitability, as well as productivity. So there were really clear outcomes as we looked at, why are we doing this? And this is really important. And then, again, to the right-hand side of the screen, an approach, and we're going to take you through a few of these items. So let's go to the next slide. And
Carrie, if I may add one thing to your comment, I think is so important. Carrie said the word culture. And this was something we worked on together with Carrie and her executive leadership. It is a culture. It is a business culture. When you go down, if you want to customer experience, customer centric, for us is customer delight. It is a culture that has to resonate from the top of your executive leadership team, we believe, to every single team member in their organization is focused on customer delight. I think that's such an important word, Carrie. Sorry to interject, but that word culture has to resonate from top to bottom of your organization. And that's what we've tried to achieve with their initiative and program.
Yeah, I love it. And it is so important because, and it's also, as we get to your journey map here, there's, and having done this myself a couple times with a couple very, old companies that have been around a long time, 170 years, 70 years of another one, you really have to focus on what's going on inside the company. And regardless what you uncover from a customer outside-in perspective, the inside of the company is also as important when you're building any kind of CX or customer delight program. So your point is so valid, Mark. And I love that was such a focus. And the journey map's a great example of this. So when we worked with Mark and his team on building a journey map by talking to their customers, looking at various different points of feedback, but you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, I mean, a map, and again, there's a lot of definitions of journey maps. The way we looked at is we did this with DTN is being really clear end-to-end what the experience was for the customers of DTN, so documenting that end-to-end experience, identifying all the touch points and interactions from a customer perspective, and then to the point of the red, yellow, and greens, what's working, the red, the greens, that's working, it's good, it's really important to get that right. What could be better? The yellows, those are those pain points, those irritants, but it's the red where it's a pain point and it really matters that you get it right. And so when you think about your own journey maps and building journey maps, you're really trying to put together, what are your customers telling you, which is what we have in the map, but also how are they spending money with you, which we also analyze how customers of DTN spend. And that really is the key to understanding those moments of truth. It's not just because they tell you it's a moment of truth. What are they doing with their dollars? And we have some really interesting data to share with you on that. But I would also say, to the point of culture and the inside the company, is when we did this map, we also have a version of who owns each of those touch points internally. And Mark, I'd love you just to talk a little bit about that, because there were some really great insights about that internal ownership and kind of how the team thought about that moving forward.
Thank you, Carrie. I think what was critical for us was the methodology and the process that Carrie taught us, from a moment of truth to a pain point to where does it intersect. And the way I understand it, my interpretation, a moment of truth is a customer's perception in dealing with a customer, DTN, that's either positive or negative. And we identified 214 different touch points through exhaustive process that we interviewed all of internal team members at DTN. We validated that with customers, and there were 214 touch points within our whole DTN. And at the time, we were more siloed up. We were business units. We weren't a one DTN approach that we're now doing through customer delight. The second thing that stood out is the classification that Customers First now uses, pain point. The pain point, the way I express it, is where in those moments of truth, the customer actually has a negative experience or something's not going right. And we identified 14 of them with DTN that we began to attack and improve. Another statistic that stood out to me, again, operating with a 4-division company at DTN, 9 months ago, is that we have 46% of our touch points through our customer support team and sales. And it was so fragmented. We had so many different processes that we truly did not realize until we went through this approach here that we were doing it different ways, different means, having different results from the customer. And it was too heavily focused on our customer support and sales team that we need to say customer first. I started customer delight. I started this discussion is a cultural change, and it goes through all aspects of the business. It's just not loaded up on the outward facing parts of the team, but all parts of it. Those are the things that stood out to me, looking at it, knowing every single point where you touch the customer, knowing what the moments of truth are, what the pain points are. And for us, identifying that 46% of 214 touch points was related to a support team or sales, which was too heavy in that one area. Carrie, I'll turn it back to you.
Yes, and that is the one stat I always think about when you think about internally, because that drove us to really, when we saw that 46% of these touch points, of over 200 touch points with the customer owned by these two teams, what we then started to look at is what's really the optimal best practice as DTN was going to really kind of one company scaling their operations. So the map helped us operationally, really look at that. And then, Mark, if you remember, we also then took Salesforce.com, where those touch points were going to happen. So where was Salesforce going to enable, a touch point? And so to make sure between, if we were going to change that touch point and it had a direct, technology implication to Salesforce, we knew that from the customer perspective, and then who owned it internally at DTN. So having a simple mapping approach that really lays it out clearly. So, anyone can look at a map like this and say, okay, end to end, aware to leave and return. I understand what the boxes, the words are clear from a customer perspective. Laying things out like this versus, some maps I've seen, it's like there's all these pictures of, I wouldn't know what to do with it. And the thing I would, guide everybody is do your maps in a way that every single person on your team could understand, and that you then know what to take action. So again, we were able to turn this map into the view of who owns the touch points, and we saw clearly 46% were owned by customer support and sales. We also did a view of this map, where are the Salesforce.com touch points, and they pop. You could just see it, and then you see where all these things intersect as we were really looking at their overall operations. Anything else, Mark, you would add on the map? Yeah.
One additional thing, Carrie, that meant something to us. What we believed was the pain points with their customers was not what the customer believed in some cases.
Yeah.
And this was through the validation process that Customer First Now did. Not only did we have joint meetings where we brought in all parts of our staff from all different organizations and walked through it, but they validated it with the customers directly. So sometimes, and that was a learning experience for me, sometimes where I thought we would have a pain point that did not line up where the customer did. And we found this. And I think that's important, the validation process that you have when you go through this. You can't think internally, you got to think outside in. And we learned that through this process. We got to go back to our customer, and we got to make sure that's a pain point, and we shouldn't attack an area unless the customer says it's an issue.
That's right. No, very good point. So one of the next things we did was then, it's get to action very quickly. So, I always call these kind of a quick win scorecard. So you get through a journey mapping project, it is a big effort, and so you don't want to lose momentum by stopping or overanalyzing the map and the data. What you want to do is now say, okay, now we know where our 3 areas, across the map of focus are. Now, what are the metrics that we're going to measure? We may have those metrics internally. So you would evaluate, do we have these, are we measuring something already and tracking? Or are there gaps that we should measure something? So with this approach, we linked right back to the map and said we had 3 customer delight drivers, those in orange on the left-hand side of the screen: solution quality, customer effort, customer support and engagement. And then with the team, the DTN team and the key operational leaders, we facilitate a session that actually looks at, again, what are you measuring that would address the pain points and moments of truth in solution quality? Same thing for customer effort. Same thing for customer support. And then where are the gaps in what you're measuring? Because here's the key. I mean, we all companies measure at least 200 metrics internally. Every single company I've been in, at least 200. Doesn't mean you stop measuring them. There's reasons you measure things for productivity and cost and all of that. But what you're trying to do with a quick win scorecard, as I call it, you're trying to get to what are the metrics that will have the highest impact to the areas of the map that need fixing and need improving. And so this is an example of where DTN, we got to with DTN. This continues to, we iterate and look at, again, what are the most important things to measure. But the team has kicked this off. And the great thing, and Mark, I want you to talk a little bit about this, is like the next step is to make sure we're communicating it internally, the team members, so they know, and then we recognize people for doing a great job. And we turn it around to customers and say, hey, here's what we've been hearing, here's what we're doing about it, and being very transparent. So again, they see your map and your analysis turn into something that's actionable. So Mark, your thoughts?
Sure. For this, as Carrie has just discussed, you can measure something, and we were measuring things before. I don't think that was probably relevant to a customer-centric, a customer-focused business. We're measuring things, but we're measuring too much. And we learned through this process for this quick scorecard, as Carrie commented, what are 9 critical things that we can measure? What is the benchmark for that? What is the industry best in class? We want to know that. Where are we at today from a benchmark perspective? And then what's our objective? How do we drive it to being best in class? And then we assigned ownership. And I think that's key. You've got to have, and if you look through the screenshot in front of you here, we had ownership, different levels, whether it was engineering, whether it was sales, whether it's operations, whether it was finance, that accepted ownership of these different metrics. And then we track it every single month. And we track performance improvement. Is it going up? Is it going down? We're discussing it. If it's not improving, why is it not improving? How do we change this? What do we do better? And as we go forward, now we're in year 1 of their Customer Delight program. This is going to tie back into our reward system, into our pay structure, our compensation, because these are areas of our business that our customers are telling us will determine if we're meeting their needs, if we're making them more successful. So we're going to tie that back into a compensation structure. And we communicate it. We have internal communications that we release every month to the senior leadership team. We also put it on what we call the hub, or internal communication network. And then we're communicating back to the customer. This is what we heard you say. This is what we're doing, and this is how we're improving. And I think it's making a difference in our business today, and it'll make a difference tomorrow as we go forward.
Yeah, and Mark, there's a couple key things, that DTN has done, and which I really love from a scorecard and metrics. And you said it. You looked at best in class metrics. You didn't say, hey, tell us everyone that we compete with at DTN and how they're doing. No, because that wouldn't be best in class. And I've been in those situations. I wouldn't go look at the competition because we were all kind of bad. What DTN and you guys did is tell us or find out what are best in class across these different metrics, and that's what we want to go after. And I think that's really an important thing for all industries, all companies to think about. It is really, you want to be the best of the best anywhere that a person at any level touches you. And the second thing you said, I think, is really important is the ownership, having a clear owner. And sometimes the owner, it's not always the obvious person. It's not like if it's a customer support, metric, people want to go to their customer support leader. That may not be the right person based on their own, bandwidth and things they're doing. Sometimes it's great to find someone that has a very high potential on your team, wants to take on special projects, to go and lead this in a way that has a sense of urgency. So that ownership one is really key too. And I think, Mark, you and the team have done a good job with that.
Carrie, I'd like to bring one other thing up that tied into this survey, and I'll be quick. I know we're limited on time. We had a statement of intent, and I think this sums up who we wanted to be, and this was created with Carrie and her team and her leadership. I think this is important. It ties back to the scorecard. And their statement of intent was this whole project, the DTN customer experience, provide our customers every day to help make them more successful. And I think that scorecard comes back to that. How do we make our customers be more successful with accountability, with leadership, with a consistent go-forward process that we're measuring that and we're driving in performance that we'll share with our customer?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Mark. And, that was one of when we were doing the journey map, with the operational teams and the customers, we were also working with the leadership team, to Mark's point, to build, what is, where are you going? So what are the design principles that are going to be really important as we fix these touch points? So is it about being easy to do business with? Is it about, being a thought leader? Is it about, what is it that really brings together your brand and your strategy? So, because that's how you bring it to life in your, the touch points with the customer. So it's a great point. And I just want to move forward to then your survey program, because this was another then really important thing. So, just to kind of recap, it's documenting the current experience, which we did through your Journey Map project, building a scorecard to take some actions immediately that can have impact. And then at the same time, we really looked at the overall voice of the customer, your survey program, and said, are we measuring and asking the right questions at the right time that link back to what matters to the customer? Because here's the thing, many companies, and I've done this, I build my survey program first. I assume I know what I need to ask and when I need to ask it, because, it's kind of, there's cookie cutter approaches out there, and they sometimes work, and most of the time they don't work. So building your survey program or redoing it to then link back to your journey is really important. So with DTN, we had, I think, Mark, over 12 different surveys going on. We stopped them all. And then what we did is we went back to the map and we said, where is it important in the journey that we really get feedback? And so, what you see on the screen right now is we immediately went out with the DTN relationship survey. So just a short survey to kind of understand across the customer base on key, we called it the Customer Delight Index, which, could be example of a CSAT or, other companies use NPS or CSAT. We created an index called Customer Delight for DTN that based on the high value items that customers really value. And so we wanted to test those questions across the database of customers. And we did one in July, 50% of the contacts, and we did the other 50% in just this October. And we'll give you we'll share a little bit of the results of that. But the key is you want that to be then your indicator, of how, where your customers are at risk and that you should be really focusing on them. So you want that to be an actual predictor of your spend of your customers. And so we'll share a little bit about what we're finding out on the DTN side. And then the 3 touch point surveys or transactional surveys, again, linking back to the map, were around customer support, onboarding and implementation, really kind of upfront in the process, and then the sales experience, because DTN is also a heavy renewal business and it's a relationship-driven business. So these customers, they love DTN and they stay with them a long time. So it's understanding through their sales contact how things are going and what else we could be doing to improve the value. So, Mark, what would you add as far as key takeaways or learnings from the survey program?
Carrie, I think the key for us was, we are a company that's had a lot of success in the past. We're well known. We're world leaders in most of the marketplaces that we serve, but we had a fragmented approach. 12 different types of surveys we were doing. We didn't score the same. We didn't ask the same questions. It was completely different as you looked across the wide scope of our business. And with Customer First Now, we realized that we need to have one approach. It needed to be simplified. It needed to be the sequence and pace and sequence. You'll hear Carrie reference a lot. We need to have it scheduled at a certain time. We need to focus on relationships, and then customer support, onboarding, and sales experience. And we went with one tool. When we looked at Customer First Now, and then we looked at a survey tool, we did an exhaustive approach. We evaluated numerous companies. We went through a full bid process, and we picked Customer First Now because we knew they understood how to get to our customers. And then we found a survey company that would help us with surveys and went through a bid process and selected those. So today, we use one common approach. We know when it's going out. Our scoring is more concise, and it truly reflects what the customer perspective is towards DTN, and it's much more easily comprehensive, and we can work towards improvements in those areas.
Yeah, absolutely. This was a major part of the program, and it is your ongoing measurement. So it's a really great way to understand if the actions being taken are working and linking all of that. So here's an example that, when we look at the results, one of the things, we have a question around innovation. So as Mark said, DTN is a 70-year-old company. They want to be perceived more innovative based on the products and services that they provide. And we were seeing in 2 of their areas of the business, financial analytics and agriculture, in the yellow, you can see customers were, kind of in that neutral box. And this was one of their lower scoring questions. And so one of the things I love about this that drove some action is that, and Mark, I want you to say, touch on this, is the DTN team created a tiger team to really go after, getting ideas around being more innovative. What else could they be doing as they listen to customers, and apply that to the things that they bring to market with their customers, and then, continue that cycle in a much more aggressive way. So I think that this is a great example of, here's a great data point, the team took action, and it's really engaging internally, I think a really strong way to go after this. Mark, what would you add to that?
Sure. Again, we're a business that has multiple platforms that goes across the 3 marketplaces with many different end solutions. So what we realized with our survey is, in some cases, whether it's true or not true, the perception was, and that impacts their business, the customer thought some of our platforms were stale. So then we had to drive action. So we created the Innovation Tiger team, pulling their best engineering skill sets and support personnel, along with product management and sales, to say, how do we correct this perception, and how do we get better with innovation? How do we go faster? How do we bring innovation faster to the marketplaces that we serve to serve this customer need where we're seeing deficiency today? That's one example. I'm going to give another example real quickly. We did restructuring of businesses based on these surveys. We also had survey results that indicated improvements need to be made in our customer support operational team. We completely broke apart our renewal team, our customer operational team, and the technical support team, and re-put that together based on survey results and on customers first now interviewing the skill sets and helping us restructure that. So we had 2 examples where we brought immediate action, and I know we're going faster in innovation, and I know we're making a difference on our customer success with some of the survey indications of what we've attacked there.
Yeah, awesome. That was another great example, is that, you really took action structurally on the team. I think I was just in Omaha with the customer support team at DTN on Monday and Tuesday. And, there is now, again, you talk about a one team and driving towards scale and consistent metrics and processes. It's a great, great example. I love it. And then the next, this is the money slide. So when your programs, and DTN, this is a great example. Within a year, after we did the customer delight survey, their relationship survey, and we have their customer delight index, what we looked at is then linking that back to customer spend. And so in a very simple way, when we looked at those customers getting the highest scores, they spend 25% more with DTN than the customers that give the bottom box. And that is what you want to see, whether you use MPS or use a CSAT or you have your own index. I don't, me personally, I don't care what any customer uses for their index, as long as it works, as long as you can do this. You really need to make sure that whatever you're ultimately measuring is giving you that, prediction and that indicator of how people are spending. Because then what you can do with a high level of confidence is go to those bottom box folks and say, okay, what can we be doing to really strategize and really understand what their feedback is versus those in the top. And so, Mark, I would love you to comment on this, because this was the ultimate goal of, of everything we put together, is being able to be with a level of precision, understand how we best continue to improve your customer's experience.
Carrie, I agree completely. I think that one statistic for all of our business folks listening to this webinar, 25% higher spend when our customers are more satisfied with DTN and how we're addressing them and how we're meeting their needs with actionable insights. For the folks that were having areas that we need to improve on, it's costing us money. We're not getting the share of pocket, the share of spend with them that we should be getting. So this customer delight, yes, we're going to meet the needs of the customer. Yes, we're going to listen to the customer. We're going to be outside in. But one of the key things is we're going to improve our profitability and we're going to improve our revenue by implementing these fundamental customer delight programs that we need to have in place, that we need to execute on, and it's going to drive results for us. We see it in statistics. We understand it better. Prior to this engagement, prior to us going through this, we really couldn't quantify, okay, our happy customers is spending this much compared to customers that may have a few complaints with us. Where's the spend at? By going through this, I can look now at the numbers, or executive team can look at the numbers and saying, unless we improve that area, we're costing ourselves this much revenue and profitability. And if we improve, we have this much growth potential and profitability growth with their existing base. Carrie?
Yep. No, it makes it much more black and white. So if we go to the kind of as we close our discussion, I just want, I thought, and we're getting some great questions in, so we're going to go to questions here very quickly. But just from a learnings to date, I think, Mark, if you could just summarize the key learnings that you've had, and then I'll close with, I think we have one more slide.
Sure. Again, we're a company that's been around a long time. I think we're well known in our marketplaces. But for us to be successful, this was the number one program that we enacted and that we delivered on this year. We've done a lot of things. We put in a brand new CRM system. We put in brand new marketing systems in the last year and a half, websites, phone systems. We've done a lot of different things. This was the number one program that's made a difference for our business. Our executive team told me that when we started. At first, I said, really? You think so? I'm a believer today. I can see the results that we're doing. I can see the improvements in the business. I'm a believer. Changing culture does take time. My recommendation, you got to have top-down buy-in from your chairman to your CEO to executive staff, all the way through to every team member in your organization if you want to be successful with this. You need to, as Carrie indicated, sometimes you need to have certain drivers, certain people in your business that can take this mantle and run with it. I think that's important also. I think you got to be outward in. I think the biggest thing I learned from this, a lot of instances, what I thought the customer perceived us was not reality. It was not truth. And through this process, we're surveying today. We understand our customers' needs better. We understand how we can reach our customer better. We can understand how we can serve our customer better. And we're going to drive greater results for DTN for the future through this. The last point I'd make, we're in a major acquisition mode. We made 5 acquisitions this year over the last 14 months, and we're going to acquire more companies. This is such an important tool for those of you that are growing your business though inorganic, because then you have a base plan. You have an idea how to integrate international teams. A lot of our corporate buys, some of them have been not non-U.S. companies. Is how do you bring them in to have one culture, customer delight? How do you focus them? We have the blueprint. We have the roadmap now to be able to deliver that as we bring more team members on to DTN. It's been a great experience for us, and we know it's making results. Here.
Yep. No, very good takeaways, Mark. And then just our last slide is, when we think about, then what's next? And so just at a high level, again, when DTN thinks about what they're going to do next, it's kind of 3 big categories: customer engagement, colleague engagement, and that gets into really now understanding the employee journey. So as Mark said, they're going into, a high acquisition mode, and when you bring in new colleagues, what's their journey like? And really making sure that's clear. How do you link it back to reward and recognition and training? And so, a lot of really good initiatives in place. And then, ultimately the company performance. They've started to get into really the analysis and, of the financial data that links back to the map. They got the scorecard, and then in general, just looking at the overall customer delight performance through their survey program. So, the takeaways are, it's be clear on sequencing. This is the pace and sequencing. Know the order by which, or plan the order by which you want to do things. You cannot do everything. There is no company I know of that has all the money in the world and all the resources and all the bandwidth to do all this. It is a lot of work. It is hard work. And it takes a focus. And so understand the pace, get the sequencing clear and in an order that you can test and learn along the way. link it back to your customers, the colleagues, and the company, and ensure, and you heard Mark say this, ensure that your communications are so core to the roadmap. Make sure you're always bringing people along, inside the company and outside. And if you have partners and other key distributors, they should be part of this process. So really good work by Mark and the team, and a great example of, and Mark and I talked about this earlier this morning, and we have in the past, it's like, man, this is a lot of work they got done, and in a company that was, constantly changing all year. So, Mark has really been, kind of the real foundation to this, and you need that. You need somebody that is your rock as you go through all of this. So, Mark, any final comments before we go to Q&A?
No, Carrie, I'll give credit to you and your team, and I'll say this. I was fortunate to be able to share a little bit what I've learned. But we did a comprehensive search. We looked at 5 companies, shortlisted the 3 companies, did a presentation evaluation. We want a partner that could understand who we were at DTN. And I learned this from Carrie, pace and sequence. You can't do it all, you're right. But someone that can understand who we are and who we wanted to be, and then work with the tools that we had. And we've been very happy with this process. It's been the number 1 program we put in this year. I see great things in the future for it. It is hard work, and my suggestion or recommendation would be you got to have top-down buy-in from your management team, and you got to have governance, and you got to have regular communication so they can see the results of all the heavy lifting you're putting into the program.
Absolutely. So, Mark, we do have some questions, so be ready. And Anthony's going to go through. So thank you, everyone, for asking questions. We got a bunch here, so we'll get through as many as we can through the top of the hour.
Yeah. So if you have any other questions, just use your questions panel. We might be able to squeeze a few more in. So Mark, here's a question for you. Culture does take time. So how did you keep your leaders engaged throughout the long term, keep them on focus and on task and not reverting back to old behaviors?
We took an interesting approach. From our senior leadership team, we have 8 or 10 team members. And as we went through this process, starting in February or March, each of the leaders may have a different responsibility. Like now, as we go into the surveys, we have our senior vice president of sales that's handling more of the surveys and marketing. As we went through the technology side, we had our CTO that was handling the technology side of it. So part of it is assigning roles and tasks that align with their skill set as you address the different needs of the business. And then we constantly, every month we had a leadership team meeting where Carrie and her team and I would support, would give them an update. This is where we're at. This is what we're doing. What's your feedback? Do you want something changed? And answer the question, why? Why are we doing this? And again, what are the desired results by doing this? So by getting them, assigning roles and getting buy-in and having them to accept responsibility for the program is key. 2, communicating on a regular basis. Answer the question why we're doing it and the results that we're going to achieve, and then getting their feedback. Because there are things that we modified or changed, including the restructuring of the business. We have restructured a bunch of team members based on this program, and it took a buy-in from all the leadership team in order to make that happen. Those are the things that I would suggest and how we approached it from DTN.
Awesome. Great. So we're getting some good questions in here. Mark, can you go into greater detail about how the customer delight performance score index that you mentioned is different from NPS? And yeah, Carrie, you can probably address that one. And how it was developed and measured.
Yeah, so why don't I take this one, Mark? NPS is one question, 0 through 10 or 1 through 10. And and for those on the phone, most of you know what NPS, but it's Net Promoter Score. What we did with DTN, because we do work also with a lot of B2B type companies, NPS is a tough one to make work in that environment. It doesn't always resonate with the end customer, which can be a decision maker or an end user of a very different type of product that's not typically consumer based. And so what we started with, we decided not to use NPS to start. We used an index that was made up of, and a delight index can be made up of 4 or 5 questions. And for DTN, we looked at, having a question specific to the product, the value. The value they provide is their content, their information and insight. So one question was specific to that. A question specific to the experience, having positive interactions. A question specific to their brand about being easy to do business with. A question specific to value, overall, which gets back to kind of price and productivity for the customer. So building an index, we decided to build an index more like that so that we could get to, so in general, from a relationship, cover kind of 4 to 5 key areas that really matter to the customer. But then more importantly is if you think of those type of questions, you can start to get very prescriptive of who goes in the company and goes after them and fixes them. Just like Mark said, as he engaged the senior leadership team, based on the feedback, there were different people involved to respond to it. We decided not to use an MTS or just a CSAT because that can be a little bit more generic. And then unless you should go look at your text data, but at a question level, it gets very prescriptive, and you can start assigning who's responsible for improving that score. Innovation was one of their questions because they had a very big focus on being more innovative. Their customers want them to be more innovative about the technology they provide that brings them the data and the content and the insights that DTN has. So an index like that is made up of those types of questions that are mutually exclusive, get back to the value of the customers looking from the overall relationship. And so the difference is something a little bit more robust and specific to what we believed would link back to the buying behaviors, which it did. And it may not have worked. And if it didn't, we would have tried something else.
Great. Thanks, Carrie. So we got another question here, and it says, Mark, how did you approach the conversation to obtain top-down buy-in, and how did you explain the value and cost benefit?
Fortunately, we had a very dynamic chairman of the board that led our company, and a world-class executive, and he understood it. As far as our other team members, it was just going through and explaining, because we don't call it customer-centric, we don't call it customer experience, it's customer delight. And I get back to, how do we delight our customers to help them be more successful? How do we do this? And then we were fragmented. We're a great business, but we were fragmented. We had 4 different business units, and in some cases, we're doing things 4 different ways. That's not efficient. That's not optimizing the process and how we engage our customers. So it was fairly easy when we walked in there and do the initial presentation to say, this is what we're trying to do, this is where we're going, to give real-world examples how we want to become one DTN, how we want to cross-leverage to better serve our customers and use best practices. But we were very fortunate in our executive leadership that understood the value of this and understand how it can evolve a business from good, better to best in class to great. And that's where we want to be. We were not, and getting back to Carrie's questions on the scores, we understood the value of what we always felt it. We think we make decisions that protect lives, that increase productivity and profitability for other companies. And we saw the scores coming back in these surveys that we started in July, and we saw real quickly how high we are on our scoring compared to best in class. It shows the value of that. But it was a combination of things, but you can't dictate to someone, in my opinion. If you want to be a leader, you got to have them buy into it. And we gave all of our leadership team a chance to pose questions, to ask why we're going down this process. But I can say today, there's no one on our team that doesn't believe in this. Everyone's found it to be successful. And again, it is the biggest program that we've tried in the last 12 to 18 months at DTN.
Yeah, and if I could just add, this is a tough one for all companies because, I hear it all the time. Well, what's the ROI? Where's the case study? And, here's what I would say. There's plenty of case studies, and Mark mentioned the chairman at the time that, made the decision that they were going to go down this path. He had been through this before. He knew what the outcome looked like successfully. So here is a CEO chairman that knew the ROI. Didn't have to be convinced because he's done it himself in another environment, another company. Now, most CEOs, chairmen, C-levels, haven't been through it where it's, what we just described with DTN. And so there is some level of, use case, ROIs, and they're out there. We have them, DTN is one of those. The key I always say is you can go look at all the stuff you want. At the end of the day, it's why do you want to do this? What is the financial outcome? And then working backwards with, either a company like ours or others, and working through an approach that's going to get you to that outcome. And that, again, whoever you work with or you do this internally, that you have a proven way to do that. But it starts with, what are you trying to solve for? Like any business problem you would have. And then, really understanding, do you have the resources, the investments, and the bandwidth to do it? And to Mark's point, I think in a lot of things they did, it took a lot of courage to make some of the decisions they made, because it was not easy. And, it's all the change that they've gone through. Because one thing, I think that's important here is change management is everything. That's the other key thing underlying all of this is, and DTN is, if I could say one thing they were really good at is around, the change management of working through this throughout the entire process. So, I would just say, no, this is a big topic of ROIs and use cases. They're there. We have them. Other companies have them. It comes down to, how do you make it relevant to your company, and working with someone to build that ROI.
So we only have a few minutes left, but hopefully we can get some quick answers on these. These are a little bit more tactical questions. Did you create a different map for different customer segments?
Well, that's a good question. So just real quickly, Mark, I know we're doing one right now. So we started with, because it was a very fragmented business across kind of 4 marketplaces, we started with one map, because again, the goal of the company was to really look at, building scale. So it wasn't about we talked to customers across all of these business segments, but we really wanted to see what's common across all customers, which we found most things were, but then what was different. So that was the main map we did. And now Mark, as one of his many responsibilities, I know is working with our team to build a map, I think, Mark, specific to transportation.
Transportation, aviation. That's correct. One of our international operations, one of our global operations, they're going through a map for me today to make sure I understand the processes better, how we're reaching the customer, do we have the right touch points, and where the pain points are. They're doing that as we speak. Yeah.
So, it's kind of one of those things where, again, our guidance to any of you out there is really understand the broader, across your customers, what are people experiencing from your brand perspective? And then as you drill into certain areas, as Mark did, here we are, 8 months later, and now we're going a deeper dive into transportation. And, and then there's plans for the team as they look at their acquisitions, they'll do some mapping of those acquisitions. So, but that's the quick answer. And I know we have another question.
Yeah, one last question here. So with journey mapping, how do you determine the most impactful pain points and translate those to moments of truth? So the difference between regular pain points and moments of truth.
So I'll take this one. Pain points are the easy thing to identify. Those are the irritants, the frustrations. I mean, they are the loudest voice. So, one of our learnings is you can't just listen to the loudest voice. If you do, you may be wrong. Because the thing people complain about the most are not always the things that matter to them. And so you want to get to, but where is that pain point also matter? And the way we get to the moment of truth is through their buying behavior. So where are the things, we saw lots of complaints about pricing. Most companies, there's pricing, pricing is a topic. But it's not always the moment of truth. They're complaining about pricing because there's something you're not delivering them in value. And what is that? And that's what you're trying to understand. What is a high value activity in their journey versus going and solving pricing? Never solve pricing first. Solve why are they complaining about pricing. So the thing that we do to identify that moment of truth is we look at who are the customers that are spending the most, and what do they like about DTN, what don't they like, and really extracting that and applying that to the map, and also looking at cancellations. Why do customers cancel? Again, that's a buying behavior. They leave you. Why did they leave you? What really mattered to them? And so those are the things we look at to get to the moments of truth, because you're looking at what do customers tell you, but actually what do they do? They're not always the same thing. So, and that's a very important distinction.
Great. So thank you very much, both Mark and Carrie. That was a really great presentation and conversation. Great insights. So if anybody on the call has any additional questions about the session today or wants to speak to us at CFN Customers First Now about your own CX or journey mapping projects, please email the email address on the screen, contact@customersfirstnow.com, and we'll be happy to get back to you immediately. So thanks again, everybody, for joining. Mark and Carrie, thank you very much. Great conversation, and we will see you next time.
Yeah, I wish everyone the best going into the new year. Have a great holiday. Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. You're an inspiration to me, and I'm sure to many of us. So thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity, Carrie, and hope everyone has a happy holiday.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. See you.
Bye-bye.